Today, I want to talk about XRP, XLM, XDC, and how they connect into the DTCC, who processes 2.5 quadrillion every year, and how DTCC purchased a currency which then ties directly back into XLM, XRP, and even XDC as well. But I do want to call out SHX and its connections into ACH payments and all 12 Federal Reserve banks, primarily because all of these things come down to connections to interoperability that are tied into the InterLedger protocol, which, as we see here, involve ACH, Fedwire, Hyperledger, R3 Corda, IBM, all of the major fintech infrastructure providers that tie back into XRP, XLM, XDC, and SHX.
Sure. So I think the case has been well made, arguably made many years ago. I think just being here this week, the conviction that continues to be around tokenization. You can see it in a lot of panels, you can see it in a lot of discussions. For Bank New York Mellon, the conviction comes from our position in the ecosystem. We actually touch 20% of the world's investable assets in Bank New York, so we're very fortunate to have a very diverse perspective across the different financial assets and the different financial services required across our diverse client base as well. We have $46 trillion of assets under custody at any given time. And I think that gives us a very unique perspective to see the challenges that do exist in financial market infrastructure and the financial market ecosystem. I think there's an increasing lack of tolerance to continue to enable some of those inefficiencies and that the risk that exists in the ecosystem.
To just remind everyone, BNY has been partnered with Ripple for a long time, and they directly touch 20% of the world's investable assets, with 46 trillion assets in their direct custody right now. And they are trying to determine how they use one of the key tools, which is tokenization. Well, a lot of that will come down to XRP, in my own opinion, with them. But it really ties back into what the DTCC does, especially now that they purchased currency. And this platform was primarily built to run on XLM. And the whole idea of it is to tokenize real-world assets and primarily to tokenize securities, which falls in line really well because DTCC processes 2.5 quadrillion worth of securities each and every year. At this point, I just want to touch on how each of these crypto companies is involved with the DTCC in an extremely direct way. So here we have Ripple and DTCC sit side by side, and they are very grateful and appreciative of the chance to discuss Ripple and the impacts of blockchain tech and DeFi in traditional finance. And then you've got XLM, who is a partner of Securrency, who got bought out by DTCC in October of 2023. And they are involved with very large traditional financial institutions because of that. And here's an introduction to how the DTCC works with XDC.
How they're projecting that they're going to be the Amazon of trade finance and tokenization. Then we had the individual representative from the beginning of 2023 mention that XDC network is a sleeping giant. And then we had Andre Casterman at Trade Investor Day just recently present the tokenization solution that XDC network has, the capabilities that XDC network has in front of large financial institutions. It's all leading up. So listen to this. In addition to Deutsche Börse expanding in digital assets, the DTCC, the US market infrastructure, announced in October that it has agreed to acquire Securrency. So the DTCC just bought Securrency, a developer of institutional-grade asset infrastructure. Securrency will become a fully owned subsidiary of the DTCC and will operate under the name DTCC Digital Assets.
And to expand on XDC a bit more, because the ties aren't as direct in my interpretation as XRP and XLM, R3 and DTCC have been working together. And if you look at Project Ion, it begins to explain a bit more on that. In our article here from September 15th of 2021, it explains that Project Ion is intended to take the T+2 settlement time in terms of days down to T+1 or T+0. And that will be accomplished with blockchain technology. The DTCC Project Ion will have 100,000 transactions per day. And they also chose R3 Corda for that. And if we go back and look at XDC, one of the largest components in this ecosystem is R3 Corda, because it is its own settlement platform that includes smart contract abilities. And here we come back to XRP just to begin to talk about the values in the trillions and the quadrillions.
No, well, I'm probably a bit more bullish, but I have been for 6 years and slightly behind my original projections. But the total market is 1.4 quadrillion, everything that's ever out there. And if you start looking across any of those asset classes, they're all starting to move on chain already. And the ease with which we've seen people interested in the money market fund, tokenized treasuries, and those types of instruments, the support for stable coins, when you're talking about replacing cash, when I see DTCC, Euroclear, Clearstream, it only takes one of them to flip onto natively digital, and that's trillions of assets on its own that move. So, tens of trillions, I think we could see. And bearing in mind it's 1.4 quadrillion, this is still a tiny slice of a huge market. 30 to 50 trillion, all on XRP, all trading on RTX.
Here we go.
All on XRP.
And this is still a tiny slice of a huge market. 30 to 50 trillion, all on XRP, all trading on RTX.
Here we go. 50.
That is a massive number that is hard to even comprehend at this point. But it all comes back to the DTCC and rebranded Securrency, which is now Digital Assets, will clear the entire market of tokenized securities. Here is a talk that happened at Ripple this past year that talks about tokenization on the XRPL, regulatory clarity, real-world assets, and interoperability, which is a lot of what all of these connections with XRP, XLM, XDC, and even SHX have because of their connections to the InterLedger protocol. So as far as SHX goes, they are a Ripple partner and one of the first crypto firms to be regulated by the FCA, with 626 billion of assets under management, went live with an institutional grade money market fund back in October of 2020, which is what was being talked about in our clip right here. So as far as how this will happen, where we're at in 2024 and on, we have a bill that has been introduced called the Uniform Treatment of Custodial Assets Act, which aims to prevent banks from requiring to treat assets under custody as a liability. And here is a bit more on SHX. They're an institutional grade custody provider and are a registered multi-asset, multi-chain insolvency remote solution that are built with Medico, which has now been acquired by Ripple and IBM. That ties back into IBM WorldWire, which ties into XLM and SHX. as well as the IBM Hyperledger, which ties into a large amount of high quality fintech cryptos. Here is the chief growth officer from Medico, who says that the institutional value chain of tokenized securities with one of the killer apps or successes has been stablecoins. And they are seeing the market cap there grow tremendously as these things get adopted that will eventually take off CBDC. And the C doesn't mean central, but for commercial. Deutsche Bank was called out in Cypress de Manicor's clip earlier, but they have put out a paper called Digital Money Options for the Financial Industry, talking about CBDCs, and it talks a lot about XRP. And as we all know, XRP is probably the product that is the most connected into large financial institutions and worldwide organizations that are heavily involved in creation of CBDCs. Here is a comment from Medico again that 11.3 trillion worth of tokenized financial assets will exist by 2030. I personally think that it'll be a lot higher than that, and I think that a lot of these projections are very conservative at this point in time. And in my opinion, I think that's because the elites and the ones in control don't want to really tell everyone about how far along this is in the adoption timeline. And here is a clip from a panel, and I think I've put this in some content before, but it talks about Ripple and XRP being some of the new rails of the financial infrastructure.
What are we talking about here in terms of these new money rail systems? So firstly, we're talking about different forms of payment rails. So a very big part of blockchain technology is bringing out something like the Ripple network, which wants to be the next generation of a payment network, a cash system. So we know society is going to change in the next 15, 20, 30 years, where our physical cash will fall away, and we will transition through a few mediums, but we are heading towards a full new digital rail system. So the question is, will we have one rails for the world? Is it Bitcoin that will win out and be the ubiquitous money rail system for the world? Or will we have sovereignly protected money rails for every jurisdiction? So I think at the moment, if we marry up probably the requirement for regulatory oversight in every major jurisdiction of the world, we will see innovations where money will be modernized per market, and therefore we will have fractionalized markets, and therefore we will have new assets to trade. We've got swaps to do. We'll have new assets going on venues. So I think the fundamental, firstly, that we have to remind ourselves of is we're in a big era of innovation for our money system to change globally.
And that is where Ripple is so well positioned, by working with not only the DTCC, but with the ISDA as well, which is the International Swaps and Derivatives Association.